Hi everyone, my name is Renee, Program Officer with EcoSchools Canada. On behalf of EcoSchools, thank you for viewing this webinar as part of the 2023 EcoSummit. I'm pleased to introduce Alysse Kennedy and Aleksa Nitsis from Natural Curiosity to present this webinar, Designing Knowledge Building Opportunities for Students' Environmental Inquiry. Alysse has recently completed her PhD at OISE, researching environmental and sustainability education and climate justice. As a guest on Turtle Island, she's enthusiastic about Indigenous approaches to story and learning. Alysse is currently the acting director at Natural Curiosity. Over the last 6 years, she's had incredible experiences teaching, researching, and organizing programming specific to environmental and sustainability education and climate action. She's thrilled to bring her skills and knowledge from past and ongoing work with the Toronto District School Board's Eco Team, the OISE Sustainability Climate and Action Network, EcoSchools Canada, EcoSchools in Alberta, ECOM, and ESETE National Network. Alysse is a firm advocate for cross-curricular, creative, and community-engaged learning, as she believes teaching needs to be relevant, accessible, and meaningful. She enjoys finding unique approaches to encouraging educators to find the multifaceted ways we connect to and make meaning of sustainability in our personal and professional lives. Aleksa is a guest on Turtle Island and is the program manager for Natural Curiosity. Aleksa is an Ontario certified history and geography high school teacher who is a recent graduate of the Master of Teaching program at OISE. As a passionate educator committed to the equity, mental health, and achievement of students, she has supported transformative and inquiry-based professional learning opportunities for the past 2 years as a program/graduate assistant for Natural Curiosity. Aleksa is thrilled to unlearn and relearn alongside educators across Turtle Island to bring the importance of Indigenous perspectives into the heart of education in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. Be sure to check out the accompanying worksheets for this webinar, which can be found linked in the description below and in the presentation schedule at ecoschools.ca/EcoSummit. We would also like to acknowledge that the EcoSummit has been made possible with support from Natural Resources Canada. We're glad to have you join us for this presentation, and now I will pass it over to Alysse and Aleksa.
Hello and welcome. Thank you, Renee, for that wonderful introduction, and we're so thrilled to be here today. Today we'll be combining theory and practice from Natural Curiosity in a relevant and accessible way. So we're going to be highlighting how knowledge building can come alive in classrooms. We'll talk primarily about primary junior, but also a little bit about junior and intermediate and senior classrooms too, in order to scaffold students' explorations of environmental inquiry for climate action. So lots of accessible ways for you to come into this work and make it meaningful and relevant to your students, which is what we hope you'll take away from this. And we're going to be providing some key principles of knowledge building, its connections to inquiry for engagement. And specifically today, we're going to be looking at practical ideas for your classroom, including creating a physical space that's conducive to knowledge building, as well as facilitating knowledge building circles, and modeling an inquiry-based thinking process for students through responsive questioning. So we can go to the next slide. And so Renee did a wonderful job introducing Aleksa and I. So we'll just say that we are really thrilled to be here today, and it's been wonderful to connect to Natural Curiosity over the years. If you aren't aware, we do have a wonderful educators resource and lots of good resources we share on our website, which Aleksa will talk about in just a moment too. Aleksa, do you want to say anything as well?
Totally. Yes, so we're so thrilled to be here with you today. As Alysse said, we do have a resource, and I'm going to be going into that just shortly. But feel free to follow us on our social media as well. We post a plethora of educator resources and upcoming events to support you.
Thank you. So at Natural Curiosity, we always like to situate ourselves within the context of the land within which we live, work, and play. We kindly ask that you pause the video and read our land acknowledgement here. This was actually written by grade 6 students at the Eric Jackman Institute of Child Study Laboratory School, which is a K-6 school right downtown Toronto in the Annex that Natural Curiosity is based out of. And this was a really powerful acknowledgement that we want to share with you because it really shows how students are thinking and processing about acknowledging and addressing the land and addressing Indigenous perspectives in the land. It's a great way to think about relational learning and how students are relating to their local context around them. And we encourage you actually do something like this with your own students. So take a land acknowledgement and make it relevant to your community. See what your students will come up with. They might just surprise you, actually.
They definitely will. So, what is natural curiosity? Well, we are an environmental education program that's housed in OISE, the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. And we provide professional learning opportunities for educators around Turtle Island, centered around Indigenous perspectives in environmental inquiry. So we offer workshops, webinars, walking tours, you name it, we're here to support you. And Natural Curiosity as a whole was actually launched in 2011, the year we published our first resource, the first edition of Natural Curiosity, which aims to help educators develop and disseminate environmental education practices through our 4-branch pedagogical framework. And though that was great, we heard plenty of feedback from educators saying that there was a lack of Indigenous perspectives in this resource. So since then, we published a second edition of our resource in 2018. This book on the screen, it may look familiar to you, maybe it doesn't, but that's okay. The really cool thing about this resource is that it has an Indigenous lens on top of each of the 4 branches associated with the book. We really realized the importance of Indigenous perspectives being articulated through an Indigenous voice. So we hired on Doug Anderson, who's Métis, and he has consulted at the community and government levels on issues at the intersection of the environment and indigeneity. So what's really significant about this collaboration, among many voices, was this dynamic process of revisiting and reevaluating our own practice and our own thinking around environmental inquiry to reflect changing times and changing communities and various perspectives, which is so connected to knowledge building as a whole. So that brings us to right now, to today. We are here to support you on your journey of designing knowledge building opportunities for students, specifically pertaining to environmental inquiry and the inquiry of climate action and justice. We are really living through a climate crisis, racial injustice and inequities, and drastic differences in income inequality between the global north and the global south. And though things are getting better in the world through the work of educators like yourself watching and researchers around the world as well, there is still more work that needs to be done, As we can see, there's an article published, 4 in 10 young people fear having children due to the climate crisis. Code red for human-driven global heating, warns the United Nations chief. So these are huge issues that are going to impact us on various levels, locally, nationally, and internationally. And we want to be here to support you on this process. So based on this, we want to pose a question to you. How do we create meaningful educational experiences around climate justice that support learner well-being? Now, you can take a moment to reflect. You can pause this recording for a few minutes and think about it, or jot down some notes in a notebook. There are, of course, many different ways we can create meaningful educational experiences around climate action and justice that support learner well-being. However, one of the most impactful ways that we believe can achieve this is through knowledge building. So I'll pass it on to Alysse.
Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about knowledge building circles, as well as what knowledge building is, its connections to inquiry and community, and give you some examples that you can use in your classroom and beyond. So what are some connections between inquiry and knowledge building? We really love this quote from Carl Berder that says, "The goal of knowledge building is not simply to create lifelong learners, but rather lifelong contributors." So if we reflect on that and think about what is that difference between learning and contributing, and how can that be an iterative process in itself that can bring in different perspectives and scaffold a greater connection and greater exploration into collaborative learning. So through this perspective, Natural Curiosity's approach to inquiry centers community throughout our whole process of learning. It focuses on an ongoing exchange of ideas and collaboration throughout the learning process. So not just at the beginning, not just at the end, but throughout the whole thing, while allowing for individual interest. So we really want to be connected to what students are interested in, what children are interested in, what teens are interested in. And there's no shortage of interesting things about the environment that you can bring into your classroom, which is the best part. So it does focus on deepening understanding through encounters with diverse perspectives and the ideas of others in that shared group learning experience. So it's about what do I know, but also what does that mean for this group I'm in, and how does that connect to what someone else knows, and how does that change?
So digging deeper into what Alysse was saying, what is knowledge building? And we wanted to offer you a definition here. And you can follow along in the resource we created in collaboration with EcoSchools, as Renee mentioned. So knowledge building is a student-centered pedagogy that emphasizes collaborative knowledge construction. It's just one way that you can build knowledge as a group and honor the knowledge and experiences of the people in that group. So its goal, as stated in the slides, is to create active spaces to share and build upon a diversity of ideas, hypotheses, information, and perspectives. So through this collaborative process, students widen and deepen their understanding, to co-construct knowledge as a community, holding ideas and knowledge advancement really at the center of their learning. So whereas in some models of education, the right answer is known at the onset, and group discourse can sometimes become a race to finding one right answer, or even a guessing game around what the teacher wants to hear. I know I've been there before in high school, definitely. So the use of inclusive and facilitative language in a knowledge building circle, or in knowledge building generally, is crucial in order to aid in creating a safe learning environment for all participants. So, knowledge building circle principles. Here we go. So discourse is central to knowledge building using a practice called knowledge building circles, as we mentioned. So knowledge building circles are they're a really important part of the environmental inquiry process, and also a really strong basis for community building, as we've mentioned. So here we've highlighted key principles of knowledge building within an environmental inquiry approach, all of which are incredibly interconnected. And this is taken again right out of that resource guide. So to start us off, students work with authentic problems and real ideas. Knowledge building circles, they're all about bridging the gap between theory and practice, as Alysse mentioned at the beginning of this recording, right? So allowing students to explore complex problems that impact their local, national, and global communities is crucial. The next one is all ideas are improvable. So we're not just going to come up with an idea and stop there. No, knowledge building circles are about creating those opportunities for students to really think of how things can be improved over time and highlight the fact that we're all dynamic. A diversity of ideas is valued. So to fully understand an idea, one requires a grasp of how it relates to the ideas that surround it, both related and supporting ideas, but also those that stand in contrast to that idea. So as learners encounter and struggle to accommodate other perspectives, their own perspective broadens and their original beliefs gain complexity and coherence, right? So an environment that welcomes diverse perspectives enables new and refined ideas. Next, students exercise epistemic agency. So a sense of agency can really empower children and youth, and adults even, to go far beyond typical grade expectations, right? The resulting sense of autonomy in knowledge building circles has strong implications for their development. And last but not least, all members assume collective responsibility for community knowledge. This is a really cool one because it allows students to really own their process of learning individually, but also strengthens their team building and collaboration skills.
Yes, and we really want to focus in on that last point Aleksa just talked about, that all members assume collective responsibility for knowledge building. within the community. So the idea is that the knowledge of the community is as equally or even more important than the knowledge of the individual. So with this in mind, having diverse points of view, ideas, perspectives, voices, and skills becomes a real asset in the process of knowledge building, especially highlighted within your small circle. The sense of responsibility for the success of all members in your group can really help encourage empathy and perspective taking. Students know that learning is not just for themselves and their own understanding, but that they have a responsibility to share their learning, to support others, and to grow the whole group's understanding more holistically. And this is a great way to connect to their interests, but also interests across the whole group as well. And we're continuing to work as a community to grow our own ideas on a topic on an everyday basis. And this can happen in any kind of classroom or school or work environment that you are in. So it's a really great approach to take to staff meetings as well, or to professional learning communities. So I encourage you, if you are seeming to be stuck in a rut in the ways that you're finding communication and crowdsourcing ideas within your team or your students, this is a great thing to bring into the community. And there's a great quote from Natural Curiosity on page 12 that talks about how participants in a knowledge building community work together to improve the coherence, complexity, and utility of their ideas. Such a culture relies on a safe setting that encourages risk-taking, the possible pursuit of blind alleys, and the acceptance of ignorance or error as integral to the idea improvement. So this idea that you kind of want to fall fast, similar to design thinking, where, you know, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to have those trials and errors, but how quickly can you get through that and learn from it and apply that new learning to the overall knowledge and figure that out. And we also want to note that the knowledge building circle is not a new idea. So it does tie in strongly with practices of talking circles in many Indigenous cultures. These are some of the principles that are found commonly in the practice of talking circles. So for example, Indigenous talking circles are often embedded in ceremony, a place where diverse truths can be assembled and respected. An example of this is an Anishinaabe talking circle, where every single person is encouraged to participate, and not in a forceful sense, but in just a way to recognize and honor that person and every person in the group has something to contribute to the overall group knowledge. And of course, different Indigenous groups and different perspectives and different people in general this will vary, and the protocols for this will vary. But this and Anishinaabe talking circle is what we talk about specifically in Natural Curiosity. And knowledge building circles and Indigenous talking circles are a really good way to represent how dialogue is important in environmental inquiry, especially, and you'll especially see this through the Natural Curiosity resource, especially that while knowledge building and Indigenous perspectives share the common goal and similarities towards helping children foster a relationship with the natural world, the cultures in which they're rooted have fundamental differences. And so it's just important to be aware of how they're different, as well as these points of convergence that we can learn from Indigenous perspectives to really inspire our teaching. So they're not the same thing, and by no means are we saying the same thing, but there are a lot of inspiration that is found in Indigenous talking circles that we apply to knowledge building.
Totally. Thank you for making those connections.
Yeah. And then here are just some great examples of questions that you can ask your students to encourage knowledge building. So this is that responsive questioning process that we alluded to in the beginning. So some questions you might want to ask are, these are low pressure questions just to get their minds on and get them thinking about what they do know. So what do you notice? What do you think might happen if? Does this remind you of anything? Connect to that prior knowledge that they have that they might not be thinking about right away. What can we do to find out? So thinking about trial and error, thinking about different ways that you can create a hypothesis and then try to figure out if it's correct or if something else entirely. And then looking back retrospectively too, why do we think that happened? What just happened and why did that happen? How has your thinking changed? This is a really interesting one, talking about metacognition for students. So how can they reflect on what they thought previously and integrate new ideas based on what they've seen and what they've learned? and what evidence supports your idea. So what can they use from their experience and from what they've gleaned from the group to create new learnings, and why these are learnings that have some evidence, have some proof behind them too. So in some models of education, we mentioned how, the right answer is no at the outset, but that's not the process of knowledge building. It's all about trying to figure out how can we come together to create this, and how can this be a localized, customized approach for your group? How can this be something that is getting your students' minds on in their community context? And so since this is, well, it can be a different way of learning than a typical pursuit of right answer situation that some students are accustomed to from standard ways of learning. It can be it can be different for students to get on board with. So you do have to set up your classroom management in a way that is going to enable this sort of safe space, but also allow them to feel comfortable sharing their ideas and encourage them to listen to the ideas of others, which, sometimes isn't always the easiest thing to do when you have a rowdy class, or a class of students that just simply isn't comfortable with each other in that way yet. So we think it's really important to use that inclusive language to help with creating that safe space. So set out these outcomes and outline these rules for your students together collaboratively as a class. Think about what ways they think they should be modeling respect for each other, and what ways they would want respect modeled for them when they're talking as well. And this can help with connecting to how they should be listening and responding to each other in respectful ways.
Definitely. So we have the background of knowledge building, but how can knowledge building circles work? How do they work? So in classes that are new to knowledge building, the educator can support the conversation by selecting who will speak first, who will speak next, ensuring that all willing students and all comfortable students have a chance to participate. Older and more experienced students, however, they may take on their own responsibility, right? Once they're more comfortable with each other and with the knowledge building process, they can select who's next. And as students become more comfortable with this, their nonverbal communication skills will really allow them to have an uninterrupted conversation that flows. And we also want to pose a knowledge building question to you folks to get you thinking about the ways that you can come up with these questions for your students and alongside your students. Now, we also want to note that not all knowledge building questions need to be as long as this one, as we're going to highlight in some of the videos. And as Alysse just did prior to this, questions can be a lot shorter and build upon one another. Okay, let me go to it. Oops. So here it is. How can we help children develop a culture where they have an ongoing, intimate, and deeply informed relationship with their environment, rather than a sense that their environment must somehow be protected from them and managed by experts? How can we help future generations shift from suffering with the burden of stewardship for the environment to a life of active participation in, coupled with deep love and respect for Mother Earth? So Doug Anderson actually writes this question for children, and we challenge you to consider this question for yourselves as educators, as I mentioned, for whatever age group that you do teach. Coming together as a community and building on each other's ideas in this way really showcases our natural curiosities, if you will. And it also showcases that a great question for knowledge building is often non-Googleable, right? You're not just going to be able to search and find the answer. These are things that many people spend weeks, months, years learning. And again, you're building up on that knowledge, and maybe you're unlearning along the way and relearning as well. So now we have some examples to show.
And just a quick introduction. So this is a video. In this video right here, you'll see this is Richard Messina. He is the principal of the lab school that Natural Curiosity is based out of. And at the lab school, every teacher, every administrator, including the principal and vice principal, they really walk the talk of inquiry-based learning, and knowledge building is a core part of that learning process that they are engaging K-6 students in on an everyday basis. So we wanted to share perspectives from the school itself in order to talk a bit more in depth about what sort of things you can expect in doing this with junior and senior students in particular for this video. So if you want to play the video, Aleksa, that'd be great.
Toggle here, between the tabs, okay.
In a knowledge building classroom, it's about the community. The community having a responsibility to create a sort of a collective knowledge.
Everybody has ideas. Everybody can grow ideas.
If you really want to get started in knowledge building, the key fundamental idea is making sure that the kids are going to ask questions that they feel are the most authentic to them.
They love coming to school. And for me, that's huge because a happy student will learn.
The students couldn't believe that we would send people on a one-way trip to Mars. What will they do for water? How will they survive? How will they cope with never coming back?
When I do knowledge building in my classroom, there's almost an explosion of information. Students are so excited about what they're learning. They're coming up to me and they're saying, Miss, look what I found, look what I learned. Did you know this?
I always explain it to my students as us having a brain dump of all of our ideas and our theories and our wonders, and we're putting them all into a big pot, and then we improve on them.
The challenge is producing knowledge of value to a community. It starts with a natural tendency to play with ideas, but it extends to this really hard piece of continually improving your ideas.
Getting the students to see that their learning was progressing. For some of the students, they hadn't had that experience before. They just sort of went through each year and didn't realize, wow, I used to think this, and now I think this.
It challenged me of thinking about, is that one possible, is that possible? Why would it be possible, why would it not be possible?
So how could we figure out how many different designs we can make? This is kind of tricky.
Our class was a knowledge building community. The students, everything happened through discourse and through collaboration.
We created a space where we could have that group collaboration and knowledge building circle area.
We did it with a different approach. We usually do with even numbers, but this time we did it with an odd number and it still worked.
Students are all actively thinking, their minds are on. They break out and then come back to reflect and make their connections.
Using we and us and our ideas, I think just that intentional language use in itself helps to build that culture of inclusivity.
I like using knowledge form because it gives everyone a chance to feel safe and explain what they're thinking about.
That quiet person who doesn't seem to contribute maybe in a knowledge building circle today might share their thoughts and ideas about the strategies on this digital tool.
The knowledge forum is that digital tool that allows us to show our thinking, and it's an infinite space so we could grow.
A lot of the point of the knowledge forum though is to make sure that you are digging deeper all the time. You're drawing the group in to build on what you're doing.
That was probably my favorite thing to do because you got to connect your ideas with other people.
It allows students to be the drivers of their own learning, and it's building their natural curiosity about the world around them.
Students kept realizing, they kept going back and going, I've changed my mind, or I've totally had a different train of thinking now, or I've redefined something. And I wanted students to see that we never stop learning and it continues to grow.
You are leading your own learning, so what you give in is what you get out.
We're not good until we're all good, which is, I've heard so much, and it really applies not only to the academic setting, but in real life.
We get to learn real life experiences. We get to learn 2 real life experiences because, let's face it, we're not going to do math worksheets when we're getting paid for something. We're not going to do a math worksheet. We're going to do something that's going to help change other people's lives and their community and help them grow forward.
Instead of just smoothing out the surface, we dig really deep.
Because they are digging deeper and becoming experts on this, they have now a responsibility to their classmates to share that information.
I really enjoy that there is a community I can rely on, and I enjoy that I'm doing something that involves my passion and it doesn't feel like work.
It's just something that is naturally inherent in the world outside of the classroom. Let's just make it part of the world inside of the classroom and get kids used to this process.
We are a community, and we are actually going to achieve something of consequence. We need every member of the organization to be contributing, or we can't succeed. So we need you. That's a lot different than the teacher wants you to do. It's we all need you to be a part of it. In a knowledge building community, we succeed when we all succeed.
Awesome. So a really awesome video that showcased an introduction to knowledge building, but also some connections that we've spoken about. So this video now is actually a knowledge building circle in a grade 1 classroom at the lab school. And it talks about science. As you can see here, it says, what's at the center of the earth? And it's going to be really interesting to see how these grade 1 students react and how they share their perspectives. So let's watch it.
The other day, we were starting to talk a lot about water and some of the big questions that you had about water. Like, how did the water get to be on the earth, and how does the water stay up and not sink down? Or how does it not fall off the earth? And then how does the land not sink? So we were talking about a lot of those questions, but then something kind of funny happened. We started talking about something else. Do you remember what we were talking about? About what's inside the earth? And a lot of you were really curious about what would happen if you dug down, down, down. Maybe you would hit water.
Or the core of the earth.
Yeah, exactly. If you kept going, what would be in there?
The
So
center.
I've got some books here that I thought we could look at together. But first of all, I thought maybe you'd like to share, maybe you've been thinking a little bit more about it, what you think is in the middle of the earth. Not even the very middle, but out from the middle. Maybe you have information you know, or maybe you have something that you think, a theory that you're not really sure about, that you'd like to share. And then when we hear all of your ideas, we can build on them, and then we can maybe do a little bit of reading to find out what scientists have discovered about this. So would somebody like to start us off with what they think, a theory, or maybe something you know? Say that again.
I think lava is in the core of the earth.
Ah, lava.
In Spain, there was an explosion of lava, and that's why there's lots of mountains in hot places.
Okay, and where did the explosion come out of?
The volcano. There's a rock mantle. It's because the lava is already the core of the earth.
So the lava is the core, and then you said a rock.
Mantle above it.
And what's a rock mantle? Can you tell people what you know about that?
Actually, the core is just rock, then lava, then just like a rain of rock.
So what does mantle mean to you?
Like rock around the core or something.
All right, okay.
I saw on a book, lots of books, that they show what if they slice the earth like a cake, and then there would be like this big ball that's holding the earth together. And it's like an orangish ball, and it looks kind of like the sun, but it's not.
Sometimes you can see pictures where it's like they slice the earth in half, and then you see what's called a cross section, and you can see all the things that are inside.
Once I was digging, and then it got harder to dig every time I got deeper.
And what do you think you were hitting when it got harder?
Rock, maybe? More rock.
Okay. So at first it was easy. What was on the top?
Soil.
Okay.
Definitely soil.
And I know a lot of you have dug at beaches when maybe sand is the top layer, and it's pretty
Yeah,
easy to dig sand,
sand.
isn't it? But then maybe as you get deeper it gets harder.
Yeah. Definitely it's a sandbox.
Yeah. And actually, some of you were wondering that the other day. Where's that water coming from when you're at the beach? You dig, 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 dig.
Because the ocean's under the sea. And the ocean goes under the sand. The earth is made out of the sand. It's all water, but there's like lands on the water.
Okay, so you're saying the whole earth is actually made of water, and then land is spread around on it.
Yeah.
Remember that tiny island that we were looking at in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? I wonder how that little, well, I guess it's not so little, but how did that island get there in the middle of such a huge ocean?
A volcano erupted in the water.
Do you think? And that's how the island was
Yeah,
formed?
that's how islands actually form. Yeah. If you're close to the ocean, that means if you dig, that means you reach water. If you're not, you don't.
An interesting question is if we dug down here, if we would hit water, and a lot of you are thinking no, just because we're not close to the ocean.
But maybe if you dug down and you were close to the water, and then you kept digging down sideways, the opposite direction of the ocean, you might needed to keep digging and digging to find the water.
But you think you might hit
deeper
water?
Down.
But maybe you'd hit it eventually? Yeah. I feel like we're getting more questions than we had before. So now you
Okay. So I love that video because it does really show how students are kind of popcorning ideas around each other, and through careful guidance from their teacher, who's not really even guiding them in certain ways, but she is just kind of posing more questions to them and to different people in the group. It's a way to kind of open the conversation up in a way that is constructing that knowledge process, but also lets them have more questions. Like she says at the end, we have more questions now than we did in the beginning. So after watching that video of the grade 1 classroom, we'd like you to reflect on that in your own time too. So what is it about this process of knowledge building that you would have seen in this video? What makes this different than maybe the teaching that you're facilitating in your classroom, and the learning that you're encouraging your students to do? And how is it similar as well? And how can you maybe change some things to facilitate knowledge building in a way that maybe you hadn't before, or maybe you're already doing this, we're not sure, but it's exactly where you are at in your teaching and learning. There are some great ways that we can support you with that. So a few things to unpack from that video is just to be noticing about what's happening in that circle. So Zoe Donahue, the educator in that video, she's really careful in how she's encouraging students to respond. So when she's speaking, and if a child in sort of interjects or interrupts, she's really careful to not give undue praise for that answer or undue criticism. So she doesn't want the student to stop contributing, but just wants them to be mindful of other people speaking as well and be respectful. So another good idea that you might want to try with younger students is to encourage children to take time before giving an answer. So you can ask them, you can say to them, close your eyes and then think about that question before answering, just to give them all a moment to gather their thoughts without darting around the room to see who else already has an answer, has their hand up, or has a moment that they want to speak. And what I really love about Zoe models in that video is the process of being a co-learner. So she's right there alongside them, learning and questioning and asking them to clarify their thinking for her. She's not being the sort of sage on the stage, like outdated model of teaching where she knows all the answers. She's really co-constructing that knowledge with them. And in other videos we have of her, she's not afraid to talk about, I don't know, let's find out. And really just kind of relating to the students where it's like, this is a process for anyone of any age. These are complex things that we can be talking about even in grade 1. So it's okay to not know. It's all about just arriving at finding out more. And sort of along with this metacognitive modeling, it's really important to relate to students in this way, because you are demonstrating your own curiosity and your own enthusiasm for what everyone's talking about, what the topic is. And that really makes a big difference into how much students can dig into what you're saying and really get engaged. If you're excited, they're way more likely to be excited. And it's also really great to see in the video. I think this video cut off a little bit early, but she does, in the full video, she talks about how let's go see what others have thought about this topic. So it's not about let's go find the right answer or see what the experts have said. It's always about what are other opinions, and then how will that process of finding that out, how will that change what the thinking is as well. So lots of really neat ways to shape the conversation, but also let students let their interest lead it and let their own knowledge lead it too.
Definitely. So we now just want to share 2 resources with you to support your journey of designing knowledge building circles and knowledge building in general for your students. And this is all in addition to the resource that we mentioned, which again is in the description of this video. So to start us off, we have a free self-guided learning series. This is a 5-part video series for educators that really introduces you to our 4 branches and the associated Indigenous lenses of natural curiosity. You can sign up on our website and also get a certificate of completion, which is really cool. So you can see that at naturalcuriosity.ca/self-guided learning. This is also on the resource guide. Finally, we release a newsletter each month called Making the Shift, and it includes plenty of educator resources, upcoming events related to climate action, climate justice, and environmental inquiry more broadly in Ontario and around Canada as a whole, around Turtle Island. So this is really useful for you as educators. You can find it on our website as well, naturalcuriosity.ca/newsletters.
And we just want to say thank you so much for tuning into this presentation. We hope that this sort of primer on knowledge building, its connections to Indigenous perspectives, as well as what that process looks like, has been a valuable way for you to start thinking about this and sort of springboard your own knowledge building about this topic, and in doing so with your own students. It is, since this is a short presentation, there is a lot more resources online that you can find through our document that Aleksa mentioned. And we just wanted to just reiterate that, especially when it comes to integrating Indigenous perspectives into this work, there are lots of great perspectives and ideas to share about this that we do share more in detail in the Natural Curiosity resource. So we encourage you to check that out, because we unfortunately don't have time to do it all here, but we hope this has been a great starting point.
Thank you, Chimigwach, to everybody.